Hi, this is Matthew Schutte with Collaborative Advantage, and this is just a quick tutorial on public-private keys and public-private cryptography, or key cryptography, also known as public key cryptography. All right, so let's get into it. Basically, we're going to start with what it is. The idea behind public key cryptography is that instead of having one key that you would use to both lock and unlock a door, it would be useful to have two keys that work together. So if you use one of the keys to lock the door, you would have to use the other key to unlock it. And if you use the other key to lock the door, you'd have to use the first key to unlock it. So they kind of have to work together to lock and unlock a door. Now, obviously, in cryptography, we're not dealing with doors, we're dealing with messages. And instead of locking them, we're encrypting them. We're converting them from some meaningful message into something that looks like gobbledygook and would be unintelligible to anybody who could see it. So let's start with how you generate a key pair. I'm not going to get into the details on this. So this is how keys get made. Alice starts with a large random number. She uses a key generation program, and it spits out, it essentially manufactures a public key and a private key. She's going to want to hold on to the private key and not share that with anyone else, and she is going to want to share her public key. Now, if she encrypts something with the private key, only the public key can decrypt it, right? If someone encrypts a message with her public key, then only someone with the private key can decrypt it. So the idea here is if you use one to encrypt, you have to use the other to decrypt. Well, this does a couple of things, and we'll get into those in just a second. So I'm going to squash that guy, and we're going to, whoops, let's make that big. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with talking about how Bob can send a message that only Alice can read. So he first gets Alice's public key. Now there's some complexities there that we're not going to go into right now about how you get a public key, but let's say he has her public key. Maybe they met at a park and she gave it to him. We use things like SSL today to ensure that people have the appropriate public key. All right, so Bob has some message he wants to send Alice. Let's say that message is, "Hello, Alice." He's going to encrypt that message using Alice's public key. So he uses her public key to encrypt the message. That determines what it's going to be converted into, right? It gets converted into this message that looks like gobbledygook, but is based on combining that message with her public key. He can then transmit that message across any network, and if people see it, they're just going to see the gobbledygook. They're not going to see what the message is itself. When it gets to the other side, Alice can receive that, and because she has the private key and is the only one who has the private key, she can decrypt it, read the message, "Hello, Alice," and respond, etc., etc. So this enables Bob to communicate with Alice without having an eavesdropper be able to overhear them. And in the security world, you'll often hear examples using Bob, Alice, and Eve, which is short for eavesdropper. So the thing that's gone on here is that Bob has been able to send Alice a message that she can read and that no one else can, right? And the fact that she has her private key and no one else does is what enables her to read that. The fact that he locked the message, encrypted the message with her public key, was what enabled her to open it with the private key. All right, now here's something that we don't have yet. Alice cannot be certain that it was actually Bob who sent her that message. She can read the message, but she can't be certain of where it came from. Well, fortunately, cryptographers have come up with a solution for that problem as well. So it looks a little more complicated, but there's some of the same steps. So we haven't yet talked about hash functions, but we'll go into those a little bit here. First, let's talk about what's going on. So this looks like a giant thing, and the whole reason why I'm doing this video is actually because this looks so complicated. But if you walk through it step by step, it's actually not. So we have Bob wanting to send a message to Alice. He also wants Alice to be certain that it was he who had sent it. Now, he's going to have shared his public key. She's going to have shared her public key. So Bob has his own private key. He also has his own public key, but he's shared his public key. Alice has access to her own private key and her own public key, and she has shared her public key. Notice, these white keys, they're private keys, they have not shared. Private, right? Pretty simple. All right, so we're going to start here. Bob wants to send a message. We're going to just start with the message itself, and this is basically the same flow that we just walked through. So he starts with the message, "Hello, Alice." He encrypts that using Alice's public key. That generates the encrypted message. It's unreadable by anyone that doesn't have her private key, so we can we can transmit it without revealing the contents. We transmit that across a network, it gets to Alice. She can then use her private key to decrypt the message, and she can read it. So now she can read, "Hello, Alice," right? However, she doesn't yet know, she can't be certain that it was Bob who sent it. So let's take a look at that side. This is signing. This is how Bob can sign the message so Alice can be confident that Bob is the one who sent it. So we take that message and we run it through what's known as a hash function. A hash function basically takes a message input and it outputs a fixed length alphanumeric string. Every time that message gets used as an input, that specific string is the resulting output. We call that string a hash. So this is going to be the hash of the message, or message hash. So we're going to hash the message, generating this message hash, and then Bob is going to encrypt that message hash. All right? Now, one of the things that's important about hash functions is this message input can generate a message hash, but it's really difficult, darn near impossible, to start with a hash and figure out the input. Something else that's difficult to do is to predict what kind of a message will result in a hash. You basically have to try everything in order to generate a hash in a specific form, right? A specific hash. So this has been called, the cryptographic hash functions have been called the workhorse of the cryptography world. They are something that we rely really heavily on in securing messages. All right, so back to the flow here. He hashes the message, and we get the message hash. We're then going to encrypt that, not the message itself, but the hash, using Bob's private key. Then that's going to result in this encrypted message. We're going to transmit that across the network. And then Alice is going to receive that, and she's going to decrypt it using Bob's public key. When she decrypts with Bob's public key, it reveals the message hash. So she's going to get a message hash that she knows Bob had encrypted, right? She knows that the person who had Bob's private key, at least, had encrypted. When she takes that message hash, and she's going to compare it with something. Well, what's she going to compare it with? The message that she had received. So the message that got sent through this channel, she can read it. She's going to hash that herself and generate a message hash on her end. So she generates a message hash. She compares it with the message hash that she had revealed when she decrypted something that had been locked up with Bob's private key. And she compares them. And if they are the same, if this hash matches this hash, she goes, yes, I know this thing came from Bob. But if it's different, invalid. That signature wasn't right. Either it wasn't actually Bob who signed it, or, more likely, the message had been changed in transit. Somebody had tried to send Alice a different message pretending to be the message that Bob had sent. That's known as a man-in-the-middle attack, where somebody would be standing in the middle, receive a message, and then relay something different onto the other person. By signing messages, it enables us to remove that type of vulnerability, or it's an approach for removing that. All right, so again, the goal here was that only Alice could read the message, and that Alice could confirm that Bob had sent that exact message, and that the message had not been altered. So that's pretty much it. This is public-private key cryptography. It's useful for a whole bunch more than this, but this is some basic functions in terms of the sending of message and generation of confidence about who the sender was. Again, I'm Matthew Schutte with Collaborative Advantage. Thanks for listening.